The world has had its shares of father-son films, and my co-host and I have covered many of them across multiple podcasts. But this week on Back to the Balcony, we are doing a very special episode for all the dads out there. A double feature dedicated to fathers and the passing of time. The dichotomy of these two films keep it interesting, mixing whimsy and sentimentality, two sides of the same coin, so to speak, as we cover Siskel and Ebert's take on the films Folks and Dad. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, two titans of cinematic review. Sometimes right, sometimes wrong, but always captivating. Your hosts Antonio of the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast and Justin Henson of the Movie Wire are here to take you back to the balcony. Happy Father's Day, Justin Henson.
Happy Father's Day, Antonio. This is a interesting lineup, but I think it's an appropriate outlook. We have some of the sympathetic dad feels and some comedic feels. So I think it'll be a fun episode.
Is it though? Is it appropriate?
No.
There's something about these two.
No. I was just going with
these
the
two
flow.
films that is like, don't watch these with your dad, essentially, but we'll get into that in a second. We did a Father's Day episode, almost like 4 or 5 years ago now on the now retired Cult-Worthy Classic. I had you guest on my favorite Father's Day movie of all time, which is Arthur Hiller's Poppy, starring Alan Arkin. It was a first-time watch for you. You loved it. It's a perennial favorite of mine. I watch it every Father's Day. And I was thinking, what other dad movies are out there that might fit into my repertoire? Well, I feel like I've covered a lot of them with other podcast hosts. Goofy Movie is probably part 2. That's right behind Poppy in my opinion. And I've already discussed Goofy Movie with you and with Josh Scar on my pod, on his pod. That's just Goofy Movie just can't seem to get out of the zeitgeist. So I randomly picked a movie at the thrift store that I'm like, oh my God, I haven't seen this movie in years. I only ever had it on VHS. Let me get the DVD. And when I sent it to you, you're like, that's funny. I was thinking about this other movie that's very similar to it, but in a more serious tone. And that's what kind of put this double feature together. Because here's the deal. Siskel and Ebert were not kind to either of these films. But each of these films seems to have their own little, I'm not even going to call it a cult following. There's just people that like these movies, and then there's people that just tear them apart. Now, where we sit, we'll find out in the episode, but like I already kind of gave away, Siskel and Ebert, not a big fan. We could dig into the psychology of that all day, I'm sure, when it comes to father-son relationships with them. But before I jump into the main conversation, why did you bring Dad from 1989 to the episode?
It's one of those that always stayed at top of mind. And it's one of those films that, you don't have to deep dive into it. This is a movie of reminders. It's filled with reminders. And when you brought Folks to the table, I'm like, this is a good contrast because you have a family that is hoping for death and you have a family hoping for life. But at the end of the day, this is a movie I think is under the radar. It was in the 90s, one of those that was mildly recognized for performances and some achievements in makeup, et cetera, et cetera. But I think this is one that when we see on the surface level, it really is just one of those cinematic experiences just to remind us of life and just to sit back and relax and not take it too seriously.
Folks was one of those movies that my good friend Brent, if you're out there, we watched the same 3 movies over and over again during this 2-3 year period of our adolescent friendship. It was Ghost Dad, it was Drop Dead Fred, and for some reason, Folks. If it was sleepovers, it would be one of those 3 movies. Captain Ron sometimes made its way into that mix. But every time I think of this movie, I think about my friend Brent and I watching this, and then the other people with us hating it and not getting how funny it was at the time. So I kind of brought it as just a novelty of my youth of wow, this movie used to really make me laugh and really make me think about what my parents were going to be like when they were old, and how did it age? Because, dude, I haven't watched this since my teenage years, right? It was a long time revisit. So we'll get into that for a second. But yeah, I feel like we both have kind of like unconventional reasons of why we brought these dad movies to our Father's Day special. And here's the thing, we're not trying to tug any hearts out there. We're literally doing dad movies because 'tis the season for dad movies. And at the end of the day, we like to hear Siskel and Ebert talk some shit about some movies. And so I think that might be the underlying theme. So again, not to get ahead of ourselves, Justin's going to start off this double feature conversation with his synopsis of 1989's Dad. Justin Henson, you have the floor.
The time is October 1989, where director Gary David Goldberg takes on a movie adaptation of the novel by William Wharton. This film follows successful businessman John Tremont, played by Ted Danson, who returns home after his mother suffers a medical emergency. As he helps care for his aging father, portrayed by Jack Lemmon, John begins to reconnect with his family and gain a deeper understanding of the man he thought he knew. Blending humor, warmth, and emotional honesty, this is a movie that you don't need to look too deep into to be reminded of time, the complexities of family relationships, aging, the enduring bond between fathers and sons, and the roots that have been placed and the roots that you are placing. This week, we cover my pick, 1989's Dad. So here's kind of the deal. This movie, and along with your pick, is hard to find. You kind of have to look for it. And, it's been forgotten over time, but I think this one really does deserve, as like I kind of tiptoed in the beginning, you don't need to analyze everything of this movie. It is merely a reminder of time. It's a reminder of family. It's a reminder of the roots we placed. This movie isn't perfect, and I don't expect it to be. Our critics are going to get into it, and this is where I disagree with both of our critics, because this one is one of those emotional pieces of it that I didn't get emotional over it until it made me think. And I think that is the main purpose of this movie. It does have some forced emotion that it attempts, but at the end of the day, it's not the emotion that it presents, it's the emotion it made me reflect on. And sometimes, as critics or movie fans, we just have to be okay with that. And just, if a movie can make you reflect, that is a successful movie, in my opinion.
I get you. I think one of the things about this movie that stands out to me is that it is very, very TV drama, right? It reminds me of just a lot of those kind of heart-tugging TV dramas of the 80s and 90s. And there was a resurgence in the 2010s for sure. I feel like it is one of the things where the emotions between the family are so hyper adrenalized, essentially, where everyone has to be yelling at each other at some point. Everyone has to be at odds with each other. There has to be the weird brother-in-law. Like, there are a lot of tropes. Am I going to say that that is a detriment to the film itself? No. If you go in expecting what I just said, it's a TV drama on the big screen, then you shouldn't be too disappointed. The critics do have some criticisms that I actually kind of agree with. But at the end of the day, I like Dad, and at the same time, I don't. On my Letterboxd review, it's like, it's either a really great movie or it's terrible, sappy crap. It can't be both. Or can it? Because it literally walks a fine line between the two. It really depends on who you are as a person and how you're going to enjoy it. Like, this is the kind of movie that would make my mom cry all the way through, right? It's the kind of movie that just makes me like, okay, yeah, that's sweet, whatever. I do think that chemistry has a lot to do with it, but we'll talk about that in a second. On a side note, like, this movie, I remember walking through the video store and seeing the cover, right? And the other movie that I always like better is Nothing in Common, with Tom Hanks and Jackie Gleason. I think that's like a little bit better movie, but it's more of a comedy. It's got a little bit more fun to it. This movie, the fun is a harbinger for pain. And that's the kind of drama that I typically don't like. Don't butter me up just to bend me over and fuck me with emotion later, because I don't like that. Be a drama or be a comedy. Don't set me up for sadness by being funny in your first act. And that's exactly what this movie does. And the critics kind of have a problem with that, and so do I. It pains me to say that this is two different movies, and I like the first half so much better than the last half.
It is two different movies because here's kind of the deal. I will go, this is where I'm going to disagree with all of you, is we get a good first half where I'll buy in that the relationship with Lemon and Danson learning the day-to-day life. I get all that. I think the laundry scene is brilliant. I love all that. But when we get to a man that is just rediscovering his life, realizing that he has freedom, realizing that he doesn't live in this alternate world, it's justified that he's lived in this controlled environment for so long, and he just gets permission now from his son that he raised to say, it's okay. There's no controlling element here. I love that because it's not just with age. You don't have to be 70, 80, 90 years old to realize this. This is a message that can go with any age element. That, you know what? Be yourself, have fun with life, because guess what? If you're controlled in life, you're going to have regret. And we see that towards the climax. This is a message, again, as a reminder. It can be sappy, it can have tropes, it can have just cheesy dialogue. To your words, it can be a TV movie. I don't care.
I disagree with it because there's a flip side of this movie. Something that I didn't really notice when I watched this movie, let's say 10, 15 years ago last, and maybe again when I was a kid. Okay, so the 1989 aesthetic of this movie, and it bleeds into the movie that we're going to talk about after. For one, the generation of it doesn't translate well to this modern generation, right? We're talking about, we've got, this whatever they call it, the golden generation, the World War II veteran, and then we got the baby boomer, right? We've got Ted Danson as the yuppie, successful stockbroker who hasn't spoken to his parents, real cats in the cradle kind of shit, right? Who comes back and feels like he doesn't know his dad and has to rediscover his dad. That is such a 70s, 80s, and early 90s trope, because that's what the audience was for this movie, was people like Ted Danson who are like, oh, I didn't get to know my dad because he was always working and then I was chasing success and I'm a stockbroker and cocaine and strippers and all that stuff, whatever, right? So there's that part to it. Folks has the same thing. But also, this movie hates women. This movie makes Olympia Dukakis like the fucking Darth Vader of bad moms. Like, she's a controlling wife, she's a controlling mother, and you wait for like some kind of redemption of like everything's okay. No, not really. The only redemption is dad dies. Like, this movie hates that generation of mothers, the controlling, penny pinching, coupon cutting. Dad can't have a life. He has to make an imaginary life that he's lived in his mind that comes to life when he's got a fucking stroke or goes into a coma and has all of this shit going on mentally, and she doesn't like it. Okay, there is a realism to that. I'm sure there are people who've gone through that situation. I sympathize with them, but you don't need to paint that character so strongly, because it makes everyone look like the victim and her the villain. And it doesn't really give her a light at the end of the tunnel. I don't like that. I don't like that at all, because it really just says that the only answer to that struggle is death. The only way out for Jack Lemmon is death. And I didn't like that at all. Maybe because we're a little bit of a softer generation. I don't know. Maybe we have different relationships with our parents. I had a pretty controlling mom, but also like, I didn't think that she ruled my world, right? I think there needs to be a little bit of rebellion. And that's one of the things that like Ted Danson represents. He got away. And it makes you think that he got away from his dad, but in reality, I think he got away from his mom. That's what it was. So I don't like the picture that it paints in the way that the movie is trying to represent itself as like a sweet, sappy film that's going to tug at your heartstrings. Don't make her the villain and not give her a redemption. Redemption shouldn't be the death of the man you spent your life controlling so badly that he had to create his own false reality. Does it ruin the movie for me? Not necessarily, but I can't watch it now and ignore that that's a very serious thorn in its side.
I again am going to disagree because here's kind of the deal is how many fucking movies did we get in the 80s, 90s painting dad as a moron that he can't do anything right? Here, it's not a movie about grandma, mom being controlling because we get a very minor piece of that in the movie to give examples of why Jack Lemon is the way he is. And the movie is about regrets and regrowing those roots to rekindle past mistakes. It's not a movie about the relationship between mom and dad. It's a relationship between rekindling broken relationships. This is a movie, and I get it. You know what? There are millions of different scenarios that people are going to relate to, and this movie is impossible to relate to every single one. Just like we take Mr. Mom, just like we take a lot of the movies that paint dad as a picture, we paint mom as a picture. These movies are targeting a certain audience of relatability, and it's not going to appease all audiences, but at the same time, what is this movie really at its core? It's about messaging of this is my regret of life. And I'll agree with you on this is, you know what? When we get to that final scene where Lemon is giving that speech on watching a baseball game and he sees a baseball player show emotion, I don't like it. I didn't like the way it made me feel, but it's on purpose because that has to put the stamp of what this movie is trying to do is have you relate to this movie, have you say, reflect on your own actions of your own relationships and move on from that. This isn't a movie with an ending that we know from the beginning isn't going to go well. And you know what?
Right.
We're not satisfied with it because we don't want to see this great performance from Lemon die, but we do, but it's what he leaves us with. And it's the same as we see our own father, if we will, on his deathbed. Are we really going to be satisfied with those last words? No, there is nothing in that moment that's going to satisfy us. And if we're unhappy with Lemon's performance and his speech on here, that's successful because that means we wanted more and we're reflecting on past experiences.
Well, and again, like the performances in the movie outdo the content. When I watch this movie, I feel like the writer / director of this movie has a real like thorn in his side about his mom, right? Like there's a grudge to this movie. I feel like this is written by someone who had a real mommy issues, who also, felt like he didn't have a chance to rekindle with his dad. But then on the underlining note of like, let's say the capitalism mentality of the 80s, especially the scene where they're having lunch after the meeting, where Jack Lemmon tells his son that he worked 25 years at Lockheed Martin and he didn't really like his job, but that's fine because he's a worker. He wasn't a boss. He's a worker. There's two types of people. There's bosses and there's workers. And he's a worker, and he was perfectly content with that. Where Danson is a boss. He wants to be in control because he gets that from his mom, who, again, like, they don't really go into why the family split, but you kind of understand that everyone just had to kind of get out. And that's the thing, is like the kid has to move across the country. It's the same thing in folk. So I think there is a little bit of that, like I said, 80s mentality where we're in the Wall Street generation, right? We're idolizing and glamorizing the wrong things. That family means something. And that part's great. But what this movie lacks, in my opinion, and I'm not saying it has to be a carbon copy, but think of terms of endearment, right? Like, we don't like Shirley MacLaine the entire movie. And then she comes out at the end with her big bravado performance. Just give her the medicine. Like, we needed something like that to get us back on Olympia Dukakis' side, or at least bring the family together, if we wanted a satisfying ending. So my biggest qualm with your opinion of this movie is the fact that this is a film that the formula all the way up until the end is supposed to give you that kind of satisfaction, and it doesn't. It goes dark. And I like dark, right? Like, it goes a little bit unfulfilling. But don't give me that movie for the 3/4 of the film and then drop the ball at the end, right? I feel like if you wanted to keep me entwined and give me kind of like that unfulfilling ending, well, the movie should have kept that tone the entire time. The unevenness is what kind of makes me say it's either a great movie or a bad movie. It can't be both, but also it can be. It's just something that doesn't work right about it. Now, when we get to the critics' opinion, I've got some agreements and disagreements with them, but it's the duality of the film, where it's one thing and then another, that I think is the most frustrating part to me.
The one thing I will say is I agree it's uneven, but it's uneven on purpose, because even when we get the news where we see the arc of Lemon's character of I fear the word cancer, and we see what happens with that result till he crescendos to just lay it on me. Acceptance. And this is a man that
Right.
accepted everything. And I think at times we forget that if we watch this movie today, it's not going to be as relatable as, say, watching it at the time of release, or even if this movie came out 10 to 20 years prior. This is a different generation of how households were run. And again, I'm speaking in the past. You had mom, you had dad. You had mom running the house, you had dad working.
Yeah.
So those are what this is really tugging at, is that generation. And is it too far off? I can't relate because I wasn't a father in that era. But at the same
Right.
time, I grew up in a house with a very strict mom, and dad went to work. And, it's one of those that I related with, because do I have a bond with my dad as I do with my kids now? No, my kids have a stronger bond because I learned from those. I learned from what I didn't like as a kid. And that's what we see Danson's character do here, is kind of reflect on his mistakes, but it takes a sucker punch of death to say, I've made a mistake. I need to fix this. And we don't spend enough time with it. It seems too quick. That's a flaw of the movie, but we can see the shining light of where the movie's going to go. If it, of course, inappropriately had a sequel, but you can see where the relationship is starting to sprout in its roots. So to me, this is where I think a lot of kids in the 80s, 90s might actually have some relatability as we get into our 40s now.
Okay, so before we go to the critics, I got one more. I'm not going to say hot take. I've been saying it lately, and I hate using that phrase. Controversial opinion. I think Ethan Hawke's character is absolutely pointless in this movie, because I feel that Danson doesn't really learn the lesson that he's supposed to be learning. And again, it kind of hates women. Like, mom went to go get a law degree and he was chasing his success. So they both went different directions, and Ethan Hawke was kind of left to kind of fend for himself and live in a commune in Mexico, right? Danson doesn't seem to care about that. He's like, okay, sure, do whatever you want to be happy with. That sounds great on paper, except it totally contradicts who he is as a person. At that point in the movie, he hasn't learned that lesson yet. So again, that's where I feel like the sloppiness of the movie is the lessons that we're trying to portray these characters are learning. They're learning at the wrong point in the movie. And a lot of the drama that happens at the end should have happened at the fucking beginning. That way we could have gotten some more growth. Ethan Hawke's character doesn't even have to be in the movie to make any difference in what the movie is and what its message is. He's in there, he's out of there. He's in there, he's out of there. It's a pointless character, in my opinion.
Not pointless. It's the idea of setting the roots for future generations. He doesn't have to have an impact. He can sit there, have no lines, but the messaging is leading up to what are you going to do next? And I think that's the point of the movie.
Danson has to be a father for the movie to work.
And I think, again, it's rushed in the second half where we could have used more, but then we run into dangers of even more tropes, or it just being the messaging just being pounded to death. I think having him in it was just a staple of saying, this is where you can change. And we don't get a lot of dialogue at the end of it, except for one conversation between father and son, and then we're done. And in any other movie, emotionally, we would have a problem with that. But here, I think it's appropriate because we don't get the forced emotion from these two characters. It's still very awkward. It's still very distant. And I think that's appropriate when we get to this. It doesn't earn the right to be, and it doesn't try to earn the right.
But the movie does get bonus points from me, though, for having everyone just hate Kevin Spacey and his porn star mustache. Like, I fucking love it. Like, everyone hates the guy. Like, don't call me mom. Don't call him dad. Who the fuck are you, Mario?
Even his own mother hates him.
I love it. That's my favorite part of the movie, is that everyone hates Kevin Spacey. All right, so we've got Roger and Gene talking about Dad at length. This is going to be a little bit longer episode, everybody, but hey, it's a special episode. It's Father's Day. Here we go.
named Dad, and it stars Jack Lemmon in potentially one of his most interesting roles as an old retired man who allows his wife to manage every single detail of his life, right down to the toothpaste on the toothbrush in the morning. When the wife goes to the hospital with a heart attack, however, Dad can hardly survive on his own, and so his investor's son, played by Ted Danson, comes home to teach him how to cope. Dad likes this responsibility and takes out a new lease on life. Then tragedy strikes as the doctors discover that Dad has cancer. After major surgery, Danson doesn't think Lemmon is getting the care he needs.
Okay, so Roger's about to talk about this in a second, but I got to bring this up because I'm so glad he used this as an example. This is the moment where the movie jumped the shark for me, dude. This is the moment where Dad just had, this incredible moment of stress and goes into like this shock-induced coma because someone said the word cancer, and he had pee in his blood. Bad shit's coming, and Danson doesn't like what's going on in the hospital. He doesn't like the way his dad's been treated, and he kind of has that real drown. He has the Shirley MacLaine moment essentially in the movie. It shouldn't have been his. Roger continues, but I just want to set the audience up for that is what is about to happen as Roger goes berserk on this plot point.
And right after that scene, Danson literally picks up his father out of the hospital bed, carries him out of the hospital and into a car and takes him home. And that's supposed to be a scene that really tears you up emotionally in this movie, but all it did to me was make me mad. Now, I've been through major surgery with aging relatives, and I know the one thing you do not do is pick them up and carry them out of the hospital after they've had their abdomen cut open. It could kill them. So that scene in the movie is simply grandstanding, cheap grandstanding, and a lot of this movie is the same way. I like the earlier scenes where Lemmon is truly helpless and Danson is helping him learn to live again, but some of the later scenes in the movie were shameless, like the one where Lemmon buys all the used clothing down at the beach and stages a costume party in the living room. That scene is a clear-cut case of filmmaking desperation. They didn't have the guts to really make a movie about old and dying parents, and so they tricked it up with cornball cliches out of sitcoms. Dad starts out well, but then it sells out.
Woo! Preach, Roger. Yeah, the movie jumped the shark when he picks up his just fresh out of surgery father who is shaking like a leaf and plowing through the hallway as James Horner piano music blares in the background. Massive eye roll at that scene, brother.
You are gonna find me a contrarian on this because in
I
any
know.
other movie,
You're such an easy bitch.
any other movie, I would agree with. But here's the deal. This is like a metaphor. This is one, I go back to my original argument. This is there as a reminder to prove a point. This is a scene, and I don't care if it was intentional or not, but I will argument it in a second. But this is one, frustrations of generational raising, frustrations on the medical system. We see these frustrations, and even though it's a trope and it can be seen as forced, and don't get me wrong, it probably is, but I saw it a little bit differently because this is a movie. If you read the book and if you see the intent and the potential, because this was produced by Spielberg and Kennedy, that they saw the potential of this, of seeing this more than what it actually is on the surface. And I think this was a stamp because we don't get those issues later in the movie. We don't get a lot of dramatic medical pieces of it, that he's on his deathbed until the climax. We get one scene that sucker punches the medical system saying this is frustrating, and it corrects itself, where we have the administrator come out and say, let's fix this.
Yeah, Dr. Santana sucks.
Yeah. And we get little hints of that saying, he's just doing his job. And then he comes back saying, we never talked, but here's kind of the deal. So I think there are some intent here of not just trying to do the normal tropes. There's intent of just saying, hey, this is what's problem with the system. And we're talking medical system. We're talking how we raise our kids, that system. This movie goes through segments of the frustration of going from young to old, how we're raised, how we deal with age, and whether it executes that flawlessly, it doesn't, because one, you're watching it at a surface level element as a one-time watch. But I think there's more than what meets the eye on what this movie is trying to do, especially with some of the filmmakers behind the helm here.
When he speaks about the costume party with the little magic show and Okay, so here's my problem with that. That is such a trope, and he's totally right. It's such a sitcom trope. It's such a drama TV show trope. What it reminds me of, it reminds me of that little fad in the 90s where a bunch of either middle-aged women or teenage girls dance around the kitchen singing into hairbrushes, right? Practical magic, stepmom. That is this moment. And it made me roll my eyes again. I'm like, what are we doing, movie? I don't like this. I don't like it when you really create genuine emotional connections with characters through your writing, your filmmaking, and your acting, and then you sully it by making the most cliche bullshit that we've seen 1,000 times be like the emotional centerpiece of your movie before you kill dad. Like, that's the part that kills me, is like the third act of this movie just sucks up all the good energy from the first part. And that's the equation that us as a viewer, and if we were putting our critic hat on, what does that formula equal in the end? Can you say 2 parts good plus 1 part terrible equals okay? Like, you kind of have to start doing math of like how much good in this movie outweighs the bullshit. And that's the problem with this movie, because there's so much good, but also the bullshit's really thick. And that's where I'm like, I can't determine where that formula lands for me.
In contrary, no, I get it.
Happy Father's Day, assholes.
I get it. This scene, they could have done numerous
You
angles
hated
to-
this scene. You don't have to defend it. This scene sucks.
No, I don't think it sucked. I think they dug themselves into a hole.
They dug themselves into a hole. They did.
Where, okay, so we have this character arc. Where are we going to take it? Where we can balance the change in Lemon's character versus Mom's character. And we do get that look from Mom where change is coming, where this isn't the same person, and it's followed up by some dialogue. I think they could have done something better. But at the same time, how do you take a father, grandson, great-grandson, whatever, the 3 generations, and put them in a scene together that feels like it is earned? They dug themselves in a hole because they couldn't. Because, again, Ethan Hawke's character, he's meant as a stamp at the end of the movie to show change. But we don't really get anything from him to build that up other than just a relationship with him and Ted Danson. So I think they really did not plan that out appropriately. I think they wanted that feel-good moment. It's a trope. But am I disappointed with it? No, I think it could have used a better song in the background as they're dancing in all these outfits. But, I'm not disappointed with it because we've seen it time and time again. Like you said, perfect example. You have the singing in the hairbrushes, the stepmom forced emotion happy scene of, we know there's going to be death coming, so here's our happy place. So
midnight margaritas.
It's that scene, and I can't fault it for it because we saw that 1,000 times over in the 80s and even going into the 90s, even to today. So it's a fun element, but do they execute on the fun element? No, it's really not that fun because we're just getting the visual of it with nothing working in the background of it. But I can appreciate the attempt of being formula.
We're not done yet. Like, we've said some shit. We haven't even heard Gene yet. Here's Gene.
I don't know that I even like the way it started out as all that much. And one of the things that bothered me about the way it starts out is the soundtrack, with lots of weepy piano music by James Horner, the composer, laid over the very first shots of Jack Lemmon in bed. And one of the things that I thought, because he's playing a 78-year-old man near death even at that point. I mean, he's a walking dead, which is one of the points of the film. And I thought, old age doesn't have a soundtrack except quiet and loneliness. And why didn't they have the guts to make the film without that sound? I don't feel, when I watch this picture, I resent soundtracks like that. I think, if they can't get me to be sympathetic to a guy who's alone in bed and near death, then no piano is going to make me feel it.
Okay, maybe it's just like the cynic in me, but I 100% agree. We already talked about my displeasure with the Alan Menken score in Life with Mikey, which, you contested that, and that's fine. But he's 100% right. It's my same issue with Terms of Endearment. It's my same issue with Ordinary People. This fucking sad bastard piano music over everything, as if like that's what we need to set the tone of sad shit's gonna happen. The ominous, the harbinger of this piano music is literally one of my least favorite movie tropes, and this movie has it in spades. I don't often agree with Gene on stuff like this, but he speaks no lies, in my opinion, on that statement.
Guess what? He might be right, but how he articulated it was awful, because he goes, there's no soundtrack to being old or getting older. Guess what? Yes, there fucking is. It's your past memories, and it's everything that you're playing in your head. How do you portray that in a movie? Guess what? It's going to be by piano. Thank God it wasn't a fucking oboe.
Okay, what it should have been? It should have been music of his youth. It should have been like Andrew's sister's music. It should have been something like that to give us a more emotional connection to the dad character. But we've heard this piano music a million times.
Exactly. And this is where I would have articulated it with Gene, saying old age is loneliness. No, it's not. Stop it, you crotchety old man. So say you can change the score, not just say I hated the piano music. What would you have done differently? Old age is not loneliness. It's stop it. You are being a Debbie Downer on life, and that's what the contradiction is to what this movie is about. It's about finding life and life going on. So Stop treating life as a negative, because that's not what this movie is trying to do.
I mean, it's 10 years away from his passing, this movie. It's 10 years earlier, but you can tell that he pretty much has like this preternatural fear of death. And he looks at it as one particular way. And when you look at his reviews of movies that are about aging and decay and falling apart and eventually dying, he has very similar opinions on all those types of movies. So I feel like he had death on the brain, right? And I think it's one of the reasons why he liked All That Jazz so much, is because it was like the inner reflection of someone who's fascinated with their own demise. And I feel that Gene is kind of in that same boat. And when that visualization of his own demise does not meld with a cinematic presentation of someone else's, he doesn't like it. That's what I feel.
And that could be, again, as we relate to these movies, you made a great point. I mean, both of these guys are getting older. Gene, again, 10 years later, does have to face it. And Roger didn't have kids. I don't want to use the word because I hate it, but inherited kids. He grew into kids, right? And I think both of these are different points of view as we're raising kids, and we kind of look at our own mortality in that light of how did we raise our kids? How our kids are going to be when we pass on? These are thoughts that go through the mind. And this is where I think is the reminder to those that have relationships with their parents in one opinion or another, and they're raising kids. And I think that's what this movie, again, is really trying to do. And I think we're getting kind of a biased opinion on both sides here. But I do agree on the fundamentals of insertion of music. But again, Gene isn't articulating it the way it should be articulated. It needed a more vast soundtrack.
Right. I think it needed a more personal reflection of the character. Again, my issue with the Life with Mikey score is that it was not personalized to any one person. It was just that score over and over and over again. This is the same, right? There is no Ted Danson theme. There is no Jack Lemmon theme. There's no Olympia Dukakis theme. There's just the music, which is a complete contrast to the movie that we're going to talk about next. But they're not done yet. They still got another 2 minutes of this shit.
Well, the whole thing in this movie is their inability to really face death and dying. And I mean, it comes right down to Jack Lemmon's performance, which in the first scenes is pretty convincing, and then little by little his energy comes back until at the end he's practically breakdancing on the beach. I mean, it is ludicrous what he goes through during that period when he's going to have his new lease on life. It is straight out of television sitcom. It is straight out of going for cheap gags and cheap emotional payoffs as a way of avoiding the very issues that the movie is allegedly supposed to be about.
The issues are fascinating. I'll tell you another problem I had. I didn't for a second believe that Ted Danson was Jack Lemmon's son. I mean, I saw them as two actors standing side by side.
One of the things that they don't seem to know about Danson in Hollywood is that he's a cold actor, and they keep putting him in these warm roles, and he never seems to really, he should really be the guy who doesn't have any feelings, which he is at the beginning of this movie, but he doesn't convince me when he comes over at the end into his heart warming up. I don't believe that.
Well, the part that I believed, and the only part that I liked of the picture, was Danson's relation to his own son, which is a very strained kind of relationship. And when they talk, there's a scene that I'm talking about 3 minutes out of a 2-hour picture that I liked, and the 3 minutes that I liked was a discussion between the two of them.
And even then, they only brought the son in order to have symmetry. Here's a guy, he's got a father, and he's got a son. The son was unnecessary.
But that happens. I mean, in life, we all are.
It does happen sometimes. Yes, you're right.
I think at the end of the day, it's just two curmudgeon-y old men that don't like the way this film represents, like you said, growth, reflection, and death. I think they have very precise ideas of what that looks like for them in their own life and how they want to see it represented in movies. And do you ever notice that, like, when they agree on something, the review is like 5 minutes longer than any other review? Like, when they disagree, it's talk, argue, then done. But they sit here and they fucking genuflect on the same points that they both agree with, right? But they just want to hear themselves almost like massage each other of, yes, you're right, Gene. Yes, you're right, Roger. We don't like this movie. Yes, okay. Now on to the next one.
You know, I can't agree with you more on that because you know what? I just reviewed The Breadwinner and I think that was one of the longest reviews I've done of the year because it was so shitty and I couldn't get my frustration out enough. But I think when you start to focus on the negatives of something, that's when the conversations really go long. And we can talk all day long about the positives, but when we're feeding the flames, you know what? You're not going to put out a fire with water. You're feeding the fire. And I think that's where we have our problem here is we're getting very passionate about the things that this movie could have been. But again, we'll go back to my argument that I'm going to disagree with both critics is even though I don't think the intent is there on how they're articulating it, is they're not seeing it for holistically what it is. They're looking at this movie as a forced emotion, and years down the road, they go into Patch Adams, which wasn't a good movie, but it has the same kind of intent to it of treating life in a different light. So I think when we take movies like this, it's so easy to say it's forced emotion, and 8 out of 10 times it is, but we stop and say, this is what this movie is at surface level. I'm seeing the same tropes. I'm not even going to stretch the surface of what this movie is trying to tell me holistically. And I think that's a lot of problems of the 80s, 90s when it comes to criticism is we take one trope and we're like, that's what this movie is going to be the rest of the movie. I'm not going to give it a shot. And I don't like how it made me feel by the end of it. So I think movies like this don't get a fair shot, even though, am I saying it's a perfect movie? Absolutely not. But it's okay to have movies that just make you reflect and think, even though you see the tropes, you see the formula, you see all this crap. But if you walk out and say it makes you think and reflect, to win.
Yeah, and pretty much as if every episode, with the exception of a few that we've recorded in the last 3 years, I would not tell someone to not watch this movie. Like, am I recommending it? No. Am I saying that you should never watch this movie? No. This movie is going to play different to different people, and that's the whole point of movies like this. It played to me very, very well in that first half, and then that last half was almost unbearable for me. But that's my problem. That's not everyone's problem. All right, so where do we land on this? Well, hey, I like both critics' opinions of this movie, but I will agree with you. I agree that Roger is a lot more articulate in the way he describes his feelings of the movie, where Gene is a little bit more emotional, a little on his sleeve, right? He's kind of Trumpy. He just like says words and throws them out there and then catches up with them later. So I think that is worth a B in my opinion. It's not a great review. Just because I agree with him doesn't mean I agree with the way he articulated his opinion.
This one's a tough one for me because I can see everything that's being said by Roger. But again, we've said it time and time again. It's about intent. What is this movie intending to do? What's the target audience? And I think it's pretty clear what the target audience is and what its intent is. And, I think if I haven't looked, but if we go on IMDb, I can guarantee that they're going to be a lot more generous in this type of movie than what our critics are.
That's a 6.3.
So I think, honestly, everything that he's stating, he is more articulate. I'm going to give him a little bit of leeway, but I'm just so sick of both of them, including Roger, looking at the tropes and just shutting down. And I get it. You're seeing 4 to 5 to 6 movies a week. You're not going to give it a shot, but there's more to this movie. I'm going to give him just 2 stars. It's a meh review.
Interesting. I thought you were going to give him a little bit better just because of the articulation, but
that was better for me.
I never know with you. You like the movie a lot more than the review. Okay. So, wow, that was 46 minutes. We just talked about like how the times you have contrary opinions on movies, the discussion goes longer. That was a pretty long one, and that was a lot. That was 6 minutes worth of them talking for the 46 minutes of us talking. All right, well, that's our first one, the sappy, kind of sweet, a little cliched, tropey dad film. And now it's my turn. I brought to the table Folks from 1992. The year is 1992, and we follow John Aldrich, a successful Chicago stockbroker whose ordinary life begins to unravel when he is forced to take care for his aging parents. After his father, Harry, played by Don Amici, accidentally burns down the family home while suffering a bout of dementia, John brings his parents to live with him, only to suffer a series of chaotic and often absurd events involving insider trading, the FBI, and testicular loss. Combining dark humor with themes of family, responsibility, aging, and the challenges of caring for elderly parents, this heavily flawed film is boosted by the performances of Ann Jackson, Wendy Crewson, and Christine Ebersole as the token bitchy sister. I'm going to save a bunch of my stuff for after the review because there is something I want to chime in on with the way that Roger and Gene describe it. But this, like I said, is a heavily flawed film. Heavily flawed. Yet, for me, somewhat rewatchable, and I can't explain why. And I think what it is because it's one of those movies that we've talked about where I see how this movie could have been better, much better than what it actually is. I think the premise of the movie is actually really good. It's just presented very poorly, almost cookie cuttery, right? It feels like a real kind of just throwaway studio movie. The same way that some people would say Cop and a Half feels, but we disagree. I feel this lives in the same era of that. It lives in the same kind of mold, but it doesn't do it as well because there's a lack of charm and there is a lack of the depths of disgust that it could have been, right? It doesn't exactly know where to land. And so therefore the jokes and a lot of the slapstick humor just doesn't land, but it could. It's there. It's there in the DNA. It's just presented poorly. I think Don Amici's amazing in this movie. I think that Ann Jackson's amazing in this movie. I think everyone in this movie is pretty damn funny, except for Tom Selleck. I just don't think this is a Tom Selleck role. You know, there are so many actors I would have rather seen in this role, and they talk about it in the critique, so I don't want to get too far into that. But, I mean, Tom Selleck has a quiet, calm humor about him. He's the kind of sarcastic Magnum PI, raise the eyebrow, wink to the camera kind of guy. He's not big physical comedy kind of guy. It doesn't wear well on him. The jokes don't land because he is not a good vessel for this kind of humor. Why he's in it, I don't know. They have their own speculation, but I think this movie would have played much better had we had someone a little bit more in tune with this kind of comedy and not a fish swimming in the wrong pond, so to speak.
First off, I just want to say Amici is totally wasted in this movie, and I just want to state that up front and center. But I think what is really missing here is comedic timing, because even when you have a hit to the groin and you can't laugh, then you have a problem with direction. I think this movie is flawed. And I think, as we talked about dads earlier, this feels like two separate movies. You have kind of the danger, the stakes in the first half of it, and then it just kind of flips to make it situational. And that's my biggest problem with the movie is there's no merging of the two. Is we go with like a light switch to, oh my God, grandpa's taking the kids across a busy street. We should be feeling danger. And then it goes into just physical situational comedy where that's not even done well because we take a hit, the camera blacks out, and then we see Tom Selleck in a bandage or a cast. So there is nothing really in the comedy here to really say I should be laughing at this because it really is a depressing, sad movie. And whenever you can't explain comedy to a certain extent, then it always becomes dark comedy. Whenever there's death, it has to be a dark comedy. And this dark comedy description is a scapegoat because this one doesn't even know how to define comedy because there really is nothing funny about this movie. It just is depressing. And when we talk about just our main character growing old and suffering, those are the scenes that he's silent, where we don't have any dialogue from him other than I'm happy. And even when he lands those lines, it's depressing because there's nothing comical about what's being presented. And Tom Selleck is miscast because he really is the straight shooter to it that he can't even do comedy. Like we see him in a cast and it's just like, oh, well, here we go again. So he doesn't know how to really handle this dialogue or lack thereof, I should say.
I mean, it's so interesting because the director, Ted Kotcheff, this is the dude that directed the first Rambo film, right? Why he's doing this kind of comedy makes no sense. However, we've talked about it before on the show. Richard Donner could have directed this. Richard Donner is one of those action directors and drama directors that can also do slapstick comedy and do it well. The other one I was thinking of was Christopher Kane. Christopher Kane's a great action director. Yeah, he can do Gone Fishin'. And Gone Fishin', in my opinion, fucking hilarious, right? Fuck it. I'll go ahead and talk about it because Gene's going to mention it later and so is Roger. This movie needed to be dark. This movie needed to be like Ed and His Dead Mother dark. This movie needed to be something that did not look like a candy-coated comedy on the surface. Maybe an early Tim Burton vehicle or something, right? Someone that could really just swim in those waters of depravity of like, especially the second half where the parents want to kill themselves to make their son's life better. And he's kind of into it. And so is the sister. Like that should have been 3/4 of the movie. But instead we have to deal with a lot of family drama, a lot of nut shots and things like that. Yeah, that's the stuff that isn't great. Give me an hour and a half of, son, I've got dementia and your mom doesn't know what to do, but we want to take care of you, so let's kill ourselves. Let's figure it out. Give me 90 minutes of that movie and make it dark and twisted as fuck. And then, of course, things don't work out, so it is kind of slapstick comedy and they keep surviving. That's the movie I want to see. So when I say like the DNA of this movie is solid, that's what I'm talking about. I feel like this movie kind of blows it for movies that could have taken the same premise and done better because this movie exists, right? And it kind of shat the bed.
I think you said it perfectly. It is in the DNA because this is a writer-director that did Weekend at Bernie's,
right?
And they made hustling around a dead body for an hour and a half funny. So there is no reason. Where they got stage fright is we took the elderly, we took a disease, and we don't know what to do with this. And when we get to the gas station towards the end, where he's covering the car in gasoline, you can tell they weren't confident in it because they cut away as quickly as possible. I'm not saying I want to see the elderly be burned up in a car, but at least take in the comedy of what the intent is trying to do. Like you said, make it super dark. Even a long shot of the cigar in his mouth. Take your time with the car driving away to let us take in what's about to happen. But it's just shot after shot after shot. Anything negative that could potentially happen to our elderly couple, we quickly have a 5 to 5 second cutaway scene, or something bad happening to Tom Selleck, a 5-second cutaway scene, and we see the aftermath. So again, go full, go dark, like you said, or Chris are going to talk about it, but you can tell the nerves are there where the filmmakers and our director don't know. I don't know if we can show this. I think I'm going to feel guilty if I show this be creative. If you can lug around a dead body for 90 minutes and have a shot of somebody having sex with a dead body, go all in on this shit and just give us something unique, something taboo, and have fun with the material. If you don't have the bravery to put it on paper, don't freaking make it.
Okay, so what works for me? I like you said, Don Amici is wasted in this movie. He does so much good. And how about this, man? I don't want to I know Jack Lemmon's your boy. I feel Dad would have been a lot better with Don Amici. And I feel that Folks would have been a lot better with Jack Lemmon. I just kind of feel that. We've seen Jack Lemmon play that goofy character, especially the goofy old man. I mean, grumpy old man altogether. I feel like if you'd have switched those, that could have worked. Don Amici and Dad would have been fucking heartbreaking. There's a softness to Jack Lemmon that is really impressive. But when he goes through those moments of severe dementia and the shaking and the seizures, I didn't buy it. But when Don Amici does it in movies, not particularly this one, but in other movies, like Karina, okay, that's what we needed. Again, this is me fixing movies that don't need to be fixed because they're unfixable and these people are dead, right? Happy Father's Day. But I really think that was a switch I would have loved to have seen. This movie, though, does win points for me for the fact that it knows what it is and it doesn't try and pull any kind of wool over your eyes of what the movie is. It's a goofy, silly movie with some weak premises to get you from A to B. But this movie, and it's only an hour and 40 minutes long, if that, it just goes. It doesn't drag on for 2 hours like Dad does. It knows what it's trying to do. And for rewatchability, I'm picking Folks, man. It just plays better, even with all of its flaws, because it knows what it is, and it's not the hand-holding kind of movie that I hate.
Don Amici, I think here, ever since we saw him in Cocoon, he has this almost typecast that you want to feel bad for him. It's hard to find him in a comedy role after kind of feeling sorry for him almost to an extent in the 80s and 90s.
Well, Cocoon, he's a dick. Cocoon, he's about to go out on his wife, right? You love him, but he's feeling his oats more than anyone else.
But I think here, I love the switching of roles. Yes, I think Jack Lemmon would have done a better job here. I'm not saying it's a bad performance, but his on-screen presence, his comedic timing, and just his almost nervousness and how to portray a comedic role would actually play better here. But it was hard for me to find anything funny with Amici's performance here because we have it almost indented that we want to kind of feel bad for him. And I don't know. It's just, it doesn't work. I don't think any of the performances here really work when it comes to the focal point of driving our two characters driving this movie. I think a lot of the stakes kind of bring them down, and I think their performances are too straightforward. And I don't think Amici's dialogue really goes anywhere other than almost a prop of here he is, feel sorry for him.
I mean, some of the jokes do land though. Like the fact that we spend literally at least 6-7 minutes with the wrong dad at the beginning. That's funny shit.
That was good.
I wish that we need more of that. There are some of the pratfalls that are just ridiculous, but at the same time, when things just fall off screen and out of nowhere and hit him on the head, okay, I'm a Tom and Jerry guy. Yeah, that shit makes me laugh. I especially and I don't know why, maybe I just like shitty characters in movies. I love Christine Ebersol and Robert Pastorelli as the doorman, and they end up dating, and they essentially take over the house, and hey, one nut, want a beer? That shit makes me laugh. Again, those are not character bonuses. Those are performer bonuses, right? The characters are poorly written. It's the people doing the performance that make those roles funny. Before we get into the critics' opinion of this, I have a question for you. Which representation of dementia and being senile do you find more offensive? The representation in Folks or the representation in Dad?
Oh, that's hard.
It's a gross question.
Come
right?
on. It is gross. But I'd have to say Folks, because you know what? Even though I don't even want to say it, it's gross. Even though the folks are trying to do the right thing, it's not even the right thing. It's a gross thing. uh, they're trying to do the right thing for their kids towards the end. So I think there is a gross sweetness to it, I guess. I don't know. But I think Dad does a proper portrayal of it because it feels more paced out. It spends more time kind of growing the relationships with it versus just trying to make it funny and just throwing situation after situation in. Because I don't think that's an accurate interpretation of how we react as a family to a family member in need. I guess if that makes sense.
It does. And I don't want to be like the caveat guy of like, well, the caveat for this one is, I am less offended by Don Amici and folks. And I'll tell you why. Because he actually does have, let's say, a MacGuffin in the film, McDonald's, that carries us through. Is it a good pop point? No. But he does have a purpose. He does have a mission. And the fact that they are trying to kill themselves, and he's oblivious to it. That's more like Mom's idea, right? Notice how Mom always says, your father and I talked, but they never show any of those discussions on screen. I think that's all Mom's fucking idea because Dad is out of his brain at that time, right? He's out of his mind, out of his body. It's Mom making those decisions. I don't think Dad has any clue of what they're actually trying to do. Where I find Dad a little bit more insulting is the pandering to the audience, right? When you pander to the audience, I just get immediately kind of offended. That hand holding, like nudge, nudge, wink, wink. We get it. Dementia sucks. Living with parents that are getting older sucks. I totally understand. But at the same time, don't spoon feed me. Like, I don't want to be spoon fed. So while Dad is probably the better movie, I find that portrayal just a little bit more offensive in its storytelling, not necessarily the performance. All right, so let's hear what our critics say about it. They're in a real Father's Day mood. Here we go.
Our first movie is named, folks, and this is without any question one of the most ungainly, unpleasant, unfunny, and awful comedies I've ever seen. A film in which, among other allegedly hilarious things, you can see the Tom Selleck character try to set his folks on fire by pouring gasoline into the backseat of their car and then encouraging his dad, who has Alzheimer's disease, to light a cigar. The father is played by Don Amici in a lovable and effective performance that only makes the sick humor of the film even harder to take. Folks was written by the author of Where's Papa, another dark comedy about old folks. Remember that one?
Yes,
Ruth Gordon
wonderful.
Had Alzheimer's in that movie. This guy gets an idea, he sticks with it. But this time the comedy doesn't work, and what we're left with are painful scenes where the actors act as if cruelty was funny.
I mean, tell us how you really feel, Roger. He's not wrong, though. I mean, we've kind of just shat on this movie, too. But, for Roger, I've noticed that anytime he says it's the worst movie he's ever seen, we should, start making a list of how many worst movies he's ever seen, because there's many. Most we've covered, but there's a lot more out there.
Well, my main problem is how he starts it off, because, again, he gets the main point, but his description of one of the scenes is kind of out of context, where it makes it sound
totally out of context.
It sounds grosser than what it is, but it's still a gross scene. And
it should be grosser, though. That's what we were talking about.
And as we lead into it, he talks about the performances. Again, he misses it, where we have on-screen presence. That's what we have. But I think it's a missed opportunity. By calling this a great performance or a good performance, I don't think it's there because the dialogue doesn't support it, and he doesn't have time to spread his wings. I mean, his most notable scene is in the shoe store, where we do see, again, what we talked about in Dad, almost a breakout trope, where we have to have that emotional moment where he is realizing where he's at and where he's at mentally. So I think that is where he is at his best, but it's only because we don't see that in previous scenes. And I think Roger is kind of just playing favorites on the performance. I'm not saying it's a horrible performance. I'm saying he doesn't spread his wings on what this performance could be. And that's missed in the criticism here.
No, I agree with that. And I also think that, again, the 80s trope and going in the early 90s of this kind of yuppie mentality, this one kind of does it a little bit better, in my opinion, because it shows a lot more stakes of what will happen to Tom Selleck's family if things go south, right? there's something about Ted Danson. Again, that's the TV movie and TV sitcom aspect of it, where we are led to believe that he is such an important guy and has all this important stuff going on. And he only stayed with his dad for a couple days. And then the answer to that is like, oh, I switched some things around. And all of a sudden he doesn't need to work anymore, right? Bullshit. I don't know. I don't think that at all. It would have made it more dramatic if they were showing like the repercussions of how much work he was missing and how that was affecting his life and his livelihood and adding on to the personal drama and stress of that. But they don't cover that at all. He goes to one business meeting that he takes his dad to just to set up that whole worker boss discussion. And then his career is not discussed for the rest of the movie. Like there's no repercussions to him missing work. How does Folks do that character better? Where literally every second he's not working, shit gets worse. Not only that, there's an insider trading illegal thing going on where people are being indicted and his accounts are being frozen. That adds an element and stakes to the movie that makes his character so much more interesting on paper, not on performance, than Ted Danson's character in Dad. So I love the fact that we have that added element of drama by like, oh, this guy's fucking life is getting worse because not only has he lost his money and his apartment and his car and his ball, he loses a testicle, his wife and kids have to leave too. And literally he's at the end of his rope. That should have been more of the movie, but on paper, I think it's better than Dad.
I'm going to go on a limb here, and I'm sure I'm going to get some flack for it, but there is a movie that did it way better. And I think if you take The In-Laws, the original, and Madhouse from 1990, put it in a blender, that's what you're getting here. Because you see a lot of those chaotic situations that went all in. You saw even the kids that just kind of are inserted, that are brats, that are just tearing up the house. I mean, throughout my rewatch, I'm just like, John Larroquette needs to appear at some point. And I think that's where this movie feels kind of just recycled and safe to me, because we've gotten those chaotic movies. We've gotten situational movies, family movies that kind of really push the envelope to an extent to just kind of teeter on the border.
This is like the fourth or fifth time you've name dropped Madhouse on this podcast.
It's coming. Love that movie. Anyway, Happy
Father's Day.
We are really, but you can't tell me when they move into the apartment, that doesn't just reminisce of just a forced chaotic environment where it doesn't feel necessary. It's just an added element where we could have spent that time on just having banter between who's already in the apartment and explore these characters. Why are we adding more characters that are just pointless other than just leading to mild entertainment laughs with other characters other than our main characters? And I think that's the problem I have with it. It's just, it doesn't focus on the focal point of what our characters can already do.
Right. If it was a 90-minute movie, 60 minutes should have just been, how are we going to kill mom and dad? In my opinion. All right. Well, that's just him bringing the movie to the table. The discourse continues.
Now, I admit it took some nerve to make this film with its shocking subject matter. I suppose they thought, well, we're going to be real brave here and really go out on a limb, but nerve doesn't make this movie funny. Maybe if this had been James Woods or Christopher Walken in the lead, somebody with a hard edge and a director who really went for the jugular, maybe it might possibly have worked as black comedy in another movie. But Tom Selleck, I didn't believe it for a minute, and I didn't believe this movie either. It was a disgusting experience.
He's 100% right, and I already fixed the movie way in advance. 1992, this should have been Danny DeVito directed, starring Michael Douglas in the Tom Selleck role, and Kirk Douglas as the dad. And it should have been dark and twisted as fuck, right? You could have had, for the hell of it, Rhea Perlman be the mom. Age her up a little bit, right? Keep with the DeVito theme, right? You could have made it so, or I know she was dead at this point, but you could have had Anne Ramsey play that character too. That's what this needed to be. It needed to be War of the Roses, dark. It needed to have Barry Sonnenfeld cinematography. It needed to have all that quirk, and then it could have been something great. But instead, it's like this flaccid, half funny, half not, half daring, half not. So at that time, I feel that's what this should have been: dark, twisted, and I loved his idea of James Woods or Christopher Walken. But if it was a DeVito, keep it with the theme, right? Put Michael Douglas in it and make it really dark.
You sold me a Kirk Douglas, because right when you mentioned that, I'm looking at the final moments of the film, and now I'm thinking of Greedy.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Just so that would have been absolutely perfect. You sold me on that idea.
Now it's time for Gene.
Well, I thought it was really bad. And also, I mean, yes, when we're talking, unfortunately, in the world today, we've had a few old people have tragic accelerator accidents around the country.
In the last week,
I
yes.
know. And this picture is so out of touch with reality. I mean, Alzheimer's disease. You say Don Amici does a cute job. I thought it was kind of embarrassing with him mugging. Don Amici is too sharp. He's played interesting older characters in a number of films. Cocoon, Things Change. Not here. Tom Selleck is, I don't know what the stretch is. I don't know what the point was. I bet it's a big paycheck, because I saw that there was some kind of financing, foreign financing at the beginning of this film. And I have a feeling that some amateurs wanted to get in the movie business, and they wanted to star, and they offered him a big deal because it's an embarrassing
Well, now
movie.
they've got a movie. They can take it home and look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. That really has nothing to do with it. Ted Kotcheff is not an amateur director. Foreign financing, yeah, getting a movie like this made, who knows? I get it. Like, this movie reeks of exactly what we've been talking about. A studio seeing an idea that's probably way too dark and way too fucked up to make it the way that it was supposed to be made. So it gets sanitized. It gets cleaned up a little bit. It gets polished. It still feels a little, if anything, it's more offensive and more uncomfortable, because you're taking away the idea of dark satire, right? If you make something dark, and if you make something so just what's the best way to put it? If you take something, make it dark, make it so uncomfortable that it surpasses any realistic expectation or representation of a disease or a characteristic, it's almost like a free pass, right? It's almost like you could turn anything to a musical and it seems less offensive because there's songs. But when you sanitize something and you try and like play patty cake with the idea of dementia and being senile, it's almost like more offensive. Like it's a double-edged sword. You have to go all the way into the darkness or all the way into the light. And my opinion is that both of these movies play in the middle, which is not where they should be. They should be one direction or the other, in my opinion, especially with that idea of that disability. I feel the same way about Rain Man, dude. Like, Rain Man is a good dramatic movie, but the representation, especially in today's lens, doesn't quite work because it's more about an Oscar performance. It's all about what Dustin Hoffman can do as an actor, not necessarily what this person's life is really like and its effect on people. It does it better than either of these two movies, but it still plays in the same water. It's like you're playing patty cake with a disability, and you either have to go all the way in the darkness or stay in the light.
Well, and here's where I have a problem again with the articulation of it, because here, in contrary to Dad, I think Roger is offbeat here, because he uses the word disgusting, and this movie isn't disgusting. If anything, it's too safe. The ideas might be disgusting because they don't go far enough, but when you use those words, it encourages people. It sets an expectation saying, we got to see this movie. And then you just get a letdown. Because again, if your problem is it doesn't go far enough, that doesn't make it disgusting.
Right.
It really just makes it safe. So what are you really telling us is, because I said it earlier, I think it doesn't go far enough because the direction is too safe. It's too timid. And there's nothing about what this movie does that's disgusting. Yeah, the ideas on a surface level is disgusting, but if we look at the intent of what the movie's trying to do, is trying to be funny, is trying to be a situational, chaotic comedy, dark comedy, et cetera, et cetera. But the topics on surface level just can't be disgusting. You just say, this movie could have been disgusting, and it could have been shocking if it went further, and leave it at that.
I mean, if this was Mel Brooks's Folks, right? That'd be a different story, because it would be an expectation that it would be overtly insulting to a community, but to the point where it's like everyone can laugh at it, right? Because he'd probably insult everybody. That's the brilliance of satire. There's no satire in this, and that's the problem. Like, there's slapstick, and that's what makes it kind of a icky feeling, is that we're turning this into a slapstick situation instead of a satire that puts like the reflective surface on a society's definition of a disability or what it means to be the child of someone. Because, I mean, again, it's a different story now, because back then these people had pensions, they had retirement, they were in communities or trailer parks in Florida, right? That doesn't really exist anymore. We're in a different world now. So I think people would look through this in a different lens than back then. But back then it was like, yeah, let mom and dad hang out in Florida. I'm a stockbroker. You know, that's kind of what the mentality was. And I guess that's where a lot of the joke was supposed to land.
I'm just pissed that Tom Selleck got better medical treatment than Jack Lemmon.
He did.
I'll just say that.
Oh, boy. So at the end of the day, I mean, okay, Folks is not the best movie. It's not a good movie, but there is like a watchability for it to me. Like I said, I'll just own my own shit on that one. Do I agree with Gene? Do I think Gene was right about this movie? Ugh. I mean, he's right in the sense that like it's not a good movie, but I feel like they're both treating this particular topic the way they treat slasher movies. There's no redemption for a movie like this that tackles this subject the way this movie does. And just opening that gate for these two allows them to pretty much shit on everything in the movie, even some of the good things. So I don't like that. So for him, even though it's not a great movie, I'm not necessarily defending it, I'm going to give him a C on this one. It's middle of the road, not great, and not well articulated, and it goes into that very familiar trope of him just picking something he doesn't like and just stabbing at it.
You know, that's completely fair. And I'm on the same boat with Roger. I think that he starts off the review, again, taking a scene out of context, which I think is unfair to those involved. And second, he uses verbiage that is inaccurate. So, and it contradicts to kind of both points of what the critics are really saying here. So, but he does make points of the overall feel of the movie. So it kind of balances out, but I can't give him a better review than I did on Dad because of those elements. So I got to give him a 1.5 stars on it.
I mean, sometimes I feel more put off by the reviews of poorly received films than I do of films that are great, that they give great reviews to, right? Because it just, again, maybe it's that journalistic idea of you have to have spicy content in order to get the attention, to sell papers, to get people to tune into your show, hear them really talk shit about the bad movies. And we've covered a lot of movies that history has decided are great that they didn't like. Folks is not one of them, but also Folks needs a little bit of defending, as does Dad. I can have my qualms with those movies. I think they were kind of both poorly treated by these critics. Well, that's it, man. That's Father's Day special double feature. I mean, what do you expect from us? We're not going to bring you Sunshine and Roses every episode. We weren't going to bring you the best dad movies of all time. I couldn't even tell you what the best dad movies are. The Goofy movie's probably up on that list. I think these movies are slept on. I think they're both kind of like underseen, underappreciated in a sense. And if there's one thing I love doing with this show, especially this season, we've been kind of going back to picking movies that we want to talk about. I never really wanted to talk about Folks. You never really wanted to talk about Dad. But we found a vessel for them to sit in, right? And we could discuss both of them, and we can say that we did it. We talked about Folks and Dad on a podcast.
And, you know, it follows the tradition that some dads are just not noticed, unseen, and unappreciated. And I think these two movies just kind of fit that bill to an extent that we all have flaws, but you know what? They at least deserve a little bit of attention.
So thank you for watching, listening. Please like, rate, review, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Like, rate, review, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if there's any films you'd like to hear us talk about on the show, as long as they were covered on the Siskel and Ebert show and there is YouTube video and audio that we can play, we'll throw it on the list. We love listener and viewer suggestions. I am Antonio Palacios. You can find me over at thecultworthy.com with my show, The Cult Worthy Cinema Podcast. You can find my co-host Justin Henson over at
The Movie Wire Podcast at themoviewire.com.
Have a happy Father's Day, and we'll see you next week.
Happy Father's Day. See you next week.